You're listening to Music Tectonics.
The Big Now with Tristra and Dimitri.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back to Music Tectonics, the podcast that goes beneath the surface of music and tech. I am your co-host today, Tristra and Eleanor.
And I'm Eleanor Rust. I don't get to be on the podcast very much, so I'm excited to join Tristra today for some big headlines.
Indeed. And for this episode, we really wanted to go basically to take a little nostalgic look back at what's been a very interesting summer when it comes to the intersection of music, tech, and media and culture, and get kind of an interesting vibe check.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the stories we were looking at today have a lot to do with fandom, and especially sort of TikTok fandom, and how the music tech trends are really involved, really shaped by how people are changing how they want to interact with artists and music.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that there are cultural forces that can be just as seismic and just as important to the topography of I'm getting very fancy here of the music ecosystem, right? So it's not just that tech determines what people do; it's that what people want to do kind of bumps up against tech, and there's this tension that, I mean, if I want to take the tectonic plate thing even further and be even more obnoxious in my metaphors, it's like these two massive plates ramming together to form these mountains, but you can't have much, if without culture, what is tech?
Yeah,
what is it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's like an empty room. It's kind of sad. All right, let's get to our first piece. So as probably everyone listening knows, a very wonderful pop star whose name is properly pronounced
Chappell Roan.
Thank you. I've been pronouncing her name all sorts of weird ways, like an idiot. But she made a very passionate TikTok about how she felt regarding certain fan behavior. And she's not the first artist to raise this flag.
Yeah, in fact, in the office when we were talking about this, our younger our younger coworkers who are also fans, brought up how Doja Cat made some similar statements, but got a lot of backlash immediately from Stan TikTok on seeming to be ungrateful for her rising star. And for context, Chappell Roan is like, she's signed to a major label. She was first signed to a major label as a teenager, but has spent a lot of time building up her both musical chops and deep fan base. But it's this summer that it's really taken off, and she really skyrocketed to fame. And I've seen lots of stories covering that meteoric rise, especially how the festivals she booked a year ago have had to move her to bigger and bigger stages as her star has risen. But actually, her TikTok videos about the sickness of modern fandom, as an article in Defector phrases it. Those videos came across my For You page, and they're really raw and I don't know, confrontational isn't quite the word, but like vulnerable, but like don't pull punches.
Yeah. So for a great recap of this whole discussion that she sparked with those TikTok videos, we're turning to, as Eleanor just mentioned, an article in Defector by Kelsey McKinney that really goes over some of these modern tensions around fandom. And in some ways, this is also a tech story, right? This isn't just a fandom story, in that fans now have access to all sorts of technology that allows them to find out more and more about the celebrities and influencers and musicians that they feel a connection to. And this parasocial relationship can lead to behaviors that kind of seem innocuous, like, oh, I'm just curious, where does Chappell Roan's sister live? Where does her mom work? Like just normal human curiosity that can get taken to this extreme that is very disturbing on the receiving end. And I really think this is a good conversation for us to have, because in some ways, understanding parasocial relationships is the key to understanding fandom, and also to keeping her mental health intact.
For sure. And also she's really used short form video to create that fan base, right? She's been posting on YouTube Shorts and TikTok for years, really like kind of from her home. She's done a lot of sort of behind the scenes covers, like demos, basically the equivalent of the 8-track demo of the 90s might be the like performing live on TikTok or YouTube Reels. And she's done that, like, right? She's engaged with the fandom in that really intimate way. And so she's benefited from parasocial relationships, but she's really seen this, something tip over into, well, what does she say? Like creepiness. Basically.
Yeah, it's a strange tension that I think is only going to get sadly, it's only going to get more severe. And we're going to have to really, again, this is where culture could play an important role, like, not to be too demure about it, but etiquette may need to change. And, we have seen that things like, I remember back in the day when people would complain about cell phone etiquette. And for the most part, that has kind of developed. Like people flip their phones over when they're having a conversation with a friend, or they keep their phones stowed and in silent mode if they know there's nothing urgent going on. So I really think there could be some progress made here.
And the conversation has to happen for it to for that to develop, for people to decide that there are ethics for, can you be an ethical super fan? How can you support and participate in fandom? And actually, I mentioned that our office got talking about this story. Somebody mentioned that the rising super fan communities might be a way to both explore those ethics, but also like create, work on fandom culture in a way that doesn't infect the artist's presence, right? So if fans, if Swifties can participate in, we mentioned specifically Fave, a fan community app that does a lot of kind of gamifying and incentivizing fan interactions with each other. If you can, move your parasocial relationships into that fan circle rather than projecting it on to the artist so much, maybe everyone wins.
Yeah.
So.
And I think a lot of fandoms are self-regulating in certain ways, whether you're talking about, going back to the Deadheads or the Juggalos or, the Barbs or something like that. There are norms that get put in place. And I guess without the conversation, those norms never arise.
Right.
Well, I'd love to move on to another aspect of TikTok that came up recently from Music Business Worldwide. And it was written by the prolific and ever devoted Murray Stassen. Who I don't know how Murray does it, but I'll have what Murray's having. Anyway, this headline is great. Basically gives you everything you need to know. Over half of TikTok's biggest global tracks of the summer are independently distributed. And many of these tracks were actually Latin tracks.
Yeah, and from parts of the Latin world that have not always been represented on the charts.
Yeah, like the number one is from a Chilean artist, which is pretty exciting.
Murray points out that it's the first time a Chilean artist has entered the Billboard Hot Latin Songs chart since 1999.
Thank you, Murray, for that great statistical analysis. It's fantastic. And this track was released through United Masters, which is pretty exciting. So the reason I wanted to bring this one up, Eleanor, and talk about it was just the increasing impact, especially in some of these channels that are engaging younger music audiences, the increasing impact of independent companies, independent releases, the sort of independent infrastructure and the artists who use it to get music before young audiences. So I think this speaks to, bigger trends that you can see, whether you're looking at Media's reports about the music sectors that have huge representations of independent music. This is, as we've talked about before on the podcast, and many of our guests have talked about, this balance of power has shifted. And there's especially in all the things that are looking at the future of music, i.e., engaging younger listeners, we are looking at a lot of variety and people coming out of what feels like left field or from the, grassroots.
Yeah.
And,
And of course, TikTok wants to take a lot of credit for that, and rightfully. There's a statement from the company's global head of music business development, Ulla Oberman. I assume.
I love it. Go look at that those Scandi chops here.
Okay.
Please let us know how to pronounce that name if you're Scandinavian here.
And he refers to the magic of TikTok, which helps our global community discover and promote a diverse range of incredibly talented artists and their music. But I don't know, Trista, do you think it's the TikTok? Is it the TikTok effect, or do you think that's the indie platform effect, or is that all work together?
I mean, I think the interesting thing about the way people experience music on TikTok is they may have a different set of like different frames of reference, right? They're not expecting things to sound a specific way, and it's more about how the music pairs with other media, as well as sort of this. I think people are a little bit more open-minded when they listen to something on TikTok versus FM radio or even on their own Spotify. Like some people don't want to I mean, I'm not one of them. I don't. I'm one of those people that what is this random weird band? And I want to hear this because why not? But for a lot of folks out there, that's not their behavior, and so they may be suffering from the sort of algo bubble collapse that a lot of people have been complaining about lately. And
it's true that scrolling through TikTok is, I mean, I'm sure from the outside, it's a strange cacophony, right? That dance music is followed by somebody's voiceover is followed by, a viral little comedy meme or whatever, is that it's an intense variety, and that people seem to really love that. And instead of ooh, I need a carefully curated stream for my focus mix, that it's the chaos is part of the fun.
Yeah, the chaos mix. Actually, I should do that. I should make a terrible well, I actually do have some playlists, Eleanor. One is called Hell's Playlist, which is basically all the songs that my children have tortured me with over the years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, let me know if anyone wants to share that one. It involves Christmas songs that can only be played in July, et cetera, et cetera.
I want to mention one trend that is not represented on the top lists, but this is just a personal thing. There's this... you might have heard this Boodots song on TikTok. It started as a Filipino dance genre that's had a long history. I was so glad to find from explainer videos on TikTok. But then it gained new life this summer as a little fashion girly trend where people would just do a very, very simple dance to show off different outfits. But then the Filipino Boodots community piled on to demonstrate the actual dance form, which is much more sinuous and difficult and exciting and very culturally has a lot of cultural allusions, a lot of connections to traditional Filipino dance, but also to political movements in Philippines. So it's there's a lot. I loved seeing that back and forth between somebody pulling that track just to make a fun viral fashion thing, and then people learning more, getting deeper, learning about that Boodots trend. But I have to say, every time it comes up, my husband curses because it's this earworm. It's this earworm that uses a Gloria Estefan sample.
Okay.
And
why not?
Yeah. And yeah. So anyway.
Well, I think that's such an important point, though, that there's also so much more context that can be provided on certain platforms. Yes. And I know Spotify's been pushing to get video ads and just video in general. In people's feeds. It's I gotta say, I mean, I want to hear from younger folks how they're experiencing it, but for me it just seems really irrelevant.
Yeah.
No offense, Spotify. I see what you're trying to do. I'm not sure. But, and again, everyone's mileage may vary,
Yeah.
but this,
Well, that is a really good point, is that Spotify algorithm seems to depend so much on categorization and sound, but not about that sort of like, okay, let's go deeper into maybe the deep cuts of this genre. If you liked something with a sample, what about like tracing its
that's a good
history?
idea. I love it.
Or if you liked the breakout hit from this global genre that's just breaking out, what about like, could you choose to go deeper? And I do see that in like suggested playlists and that kind
third-party
of thing.
playlists will often play that role, but
Oh, sure, but
they're
not
static.
Yeah.
They're not getting kind of served to you in quite the same way as you might get on like if you put on Smart Shuffle or the radio function.
Or
anyway,
the DJ. Yeah.
All right. Well, we're going to take a quick break here, and then we're going to come back with more on a new platform and music.
And Brett Summer.
Of course.
The Music Tectonics team has been hard at work programming an amazing lineup of speakers for our 2024 edition. I've had the opportunity to talk with some of our thought leaders, and here's what they're excited about. Joe Toe of Sony Ventures is looking at the big picture. To quote him, "Right now, we are witnessing a remarkable convergence of entertainment media encompassing music, gaming, streaming, and more. This fusion within the entertainment landscape is revolutionizing the way fans consume content. It enables deeper connections and engagement with creators through innovative and immersive experiences. By leveraging these diverse media forms, we are fostering a dynamic and interactive ecosystem where creativity and interaction thrive in unprecedented ways." Other hot topics speakers are excited to dive into include AI comes to market, superfans and fandom, late-stage streaming, gamers as music fans, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. Head over to musictectonics.com/speakers to check out our amazing lineup of thought leaders, updated regularly. Now back to the show.
Okay, we're back. And Eleanor, I have to say, I have a little bit of a LinkedIn newsletter intellectual crush on Matt Ombler, who writes about video games and music and has just often really excellent analyses of the gaming world and how it intersects with the music business from points of view that I've never considered. Like, we'll talk about his latest Oh my goodness. We'll talk about his latest newsletter right now, but he in the past has done everything from talk about Christian games and like sort of the strange gap in the market because, there's a lot of Christian contemporary music. There's not a lot of games that make the most of this music. So he raises some really cool questions and points to some interesting trends and dynamics that I don't see anywhere else. Maybe I'm just not reading all the good stuff, but I also think Matt knows what he's talking about, which is great. So recently he published a newsletter called Charlie XCX on Roblox, the best music activation on the platform yet? ?
Wow.
Yeah.
And this is the Game Music Digest is his weekly newsletter, by the way.
Yeah, we'll put some stuff in the show notes so you can track Matt down and become his devoted follower.
Those show notes will be at musictectonics.com. Just find the podcast button in the menu, and it'll take you to a list of episodes with links and show notes.
So what Matt goes into a lot of detail about, super helpful, is Charlie XCX has finally brought Brat to Roblox. It felt like this was a long time coming, but these things take time to develop and create. So there's sort of a Roblox game called Dress to Impress.
Which is huge, right?
Yes,
I mean, looking at those
it's a big
numbers,
deal.
it's in users are in the billions.
Yes. But Charlie gave it a 12 million player bump.
Yeah.
And what's really interesting here is there's kind of a bunch of cultural cliches that have developed on Roblox. So as people are thinking about things like mini games or accessories or whatever, I'm probably not using the right words because I'm a cringe bomb. They're often thinking in really narrow terms. It's kind of like what's gone before. And what Charlie's team did that was so brilliant was they took all of the imagery and sort of ideas and color schemes, etc., that had played a huge role in making her album such a viral thing this summer, and interpreted it for Roblox. And so it's a real it feels really fresh and really connected to the Brat vision.
Yeah. And Matt Ombler, I think his analysis is really astute about why this really worked, at least for Roblox. I don't know if there's been time to see an effect on Charlie XCX's numbers. But that there's a real natural audience overlap. That there's social media buzz about the album and among the people who are also using Roblox, that the aesthetics and the mechanics of the game work together. And I thought that was really essential because one thing we've heard at the Music Tectonics conference when we are bringing together people who work in games and music and tech all around topics like this, that a lot of music industry folks seem to be looking at games and saying, well, I just want a piece of that. When really it has success comes when you really understand the community and what people want, that you can't just kind of copy paste.
Yeah. And sometimes, if someone plays games, if an artist plays games, it makes it, 1,000 times easier. So for instance, I've seen some really neat album launches that incorporated games, and they were kind of like those whole games, where you sort of become a bigger and bigger whole and swallow more and more things.
Oh yeah.
But it really fit the artist's vibe, their aesthetics, and it made a ton of sense to the audience. So in some ways, instead of just doing Roblox to do Roblox, you got to think about how would we fit into Roblox.
Yeah. Well, and that's why Dress to Impress was a good match.
Such a perfect match.
In audience, but also that the Brat aesthetic has that. I mean, the look in the pictures that Matt Ombler, the screen caps that Matt Ombler shared, there's a sort of a 2000s Brat doll look in Dress to Impress that the Brat merch in game really complements, right? There's a Y2K kind of aesthetic going on that really works. And the merch within this this collaboration just looks, it just fits. There's no shoehorning.
Yeah, I mean, so maybe if you're thinking about this, if you're an artist, maybe this isn't, but maybe that's not the game you engage. Maybe you engage I don't know, Pizza Mogul. What's the other? What are some of the other ones? I would say if I were an artist, I would definitely be in the one where you run your own car wash or something like that.
Yeah.
That would definitely be where I'd want to do an activation. Anyway, that was so. Anyway, check Matt's stuff out. And
Brat Summer will not be over until we talk about another Brat collaboration.
Bratulation. It's like a constellation, but with brats.
Yeah.
All right, so I've been really seeing a ton of stories. I mean, there's obviously it's election season. Stuff's heating up. Things are getting very, the energy in the room is increasing, so to speak. And since Kamala Harris has become the Democratic nominee in the U.S., the balance has really shifted. And there's been a lot of talk about influencers, memes, internet culture, and how that's playing into this election. So everyone was kind of expecting this would be the AI election, quote unquote. But AI stuff has fallen really flat. See Trump's Swiftie debacle.
Yeah.
And in general, there's been a lot of talk about how music should be used by campaigns and candidates. So we've heard about Beyonce sending cease and desist letters to the Trump campaign for their use of freedom. There's a lot of talk about this, but there was a great Billboard piece by Kyle Dennis recently called "What Can Kamala Harris's Presidential Campaign Tell Us About the Current State of Pop Fandom?" And this article mentions Beyonce, Charlie XCX, Chappell, Roan, Megan Thee Stallion, and sort of shows the sort of musical aspect of a lot of this meme culture that's coming up. So I just wanted to point this out that I can't recall. I mean, obviously, there's always been these glitches where some campaign has used an artist's music and the artist isn't on their side. Often it's a more liberal artist being used by a conservative candidate. But it really feels like music is playing a guiding role and that pop stars are almost becoming spokespeople for certain or kind
Yeah.
of sort of I mean not being completely drafted into service as an official spokesperson,
Right,
but
but being willing to lend their music and sometimes their live performances to campaigns, and I thought it was interesting that while and the article mentions that Megan Thee Stallion and Bon Iver, for like very different artist picks, have performed.
I mean, there's a collab I'd love to see.
Right. Anyway, they both performed. They've performed at different rallies for Kamala Harris, and that "Freedom" is an official campaign song for the Harris campaign. That the Harris campaign at its initial launch adopted that Charlie XCX Brat album aesthetic, and with
Charlie's blessing. I mean, she tweeted like that Kamala was Brat. Like I think that was literally the entire tweet.
It was, Kamala is Brat, right? And just as a side note, this Billboard piece links to the hilarious Explainers segment on CNN, in which the anchors all sort of like carefully enunciate things like, I think you might say she owned it.
It's absolutely adorable. It's adorable.
It's great. But also a note that at the same time, Trump is tweeting, or I guess tweeting and truth socialing, whatever
that is.
These
truthing,
these AI images about Taylor Swift and ISIS or something.
Because the claim was that the Swifties are up in arms and voting for Trump because Taylor's concert got interrupted by ISIS, which had to be one of the most 2024 storylines.
Right, but obviously, however ineffectual that is, it's still trying to tap into fandom and the power of artists to make a political stance feel cool, to adjust the vibe.
And that was an interesting. If you think about Taylor Swift, as she has this interesting position as being this sort of wholesome, middle America, not Midwestern like Waltz, but but sort of like middle of the road, mainstream, good American girl,
country roots, pop fan stardom,
football, football sweetie, like very
but also
much
not like other girls.
Yeah. So, but that's what. Yeah, and please, Swifties, don't hate on us. Okay, it's all good.
This is we say all of this with love. This is
whatever. You can love Taylor as much as you need to, but it's interesting that she could be used in that way, as leaning toward, well, maybe she's actually conservative. And I think that's one of her, just speaking about Taylor Swift first, that's one of her magic powers. Yeah. That she's been able to find that weird Venn diagram, tiny little space and just make the most of it. It's pretty impressive.
Some of that is through not making public statements about her political support. Yeah. And in some ways, this reminds me of Dolly Parton's long stance, which is that, she focuses on individuals and love, and so she, when people ask her about her politics, especially I think lately about her fans in the LGBTQ plus community, that she focuses on loving individuals and not making grand political statements or sweeping statements about her political choices.
Well, except for that Marxist. No, sorry, that's just as fake as. All right, take this out.
Actually, I mean, if we wanted to get into fake Dolly Parton.
Let's do it. Okay,
actually,
yes. We have some fake Dolly Parton for you, ladies and gentlemen.
Kristen Robinson of Billboard. If you're not subscribed to her machine learning newsletter, you really ought to be.
You're missing out.
Yeah. So this piece is available to read on the Billboard website if you don't get the newsletter. It's titled "Don't Believe the Internet: Inside the Digital Agency Making Fan Fiction for Artists."
And, Eleanor and I, being the people we are, were like, oh, wow. I was like, is someone generating novels about
Are they
Shabuzi?
posting 50K fanfics on AO3?
There we go. Well, it's not quite that. So, Eleanor, do you want to run us through what they're doing? Because it's fascinating.
Yeah, so it's... fans are always making content about their artists, sometimes in line with the artist's sort of public persona, sometimes kind of at odds with it, doing with things like fan cams, where there's a lot of edits of existing appearances of the artist. But this new digital agency called Water Cooler, just remove a few vowels.
No E's, please.
No E's. No A. They are making they're making TikTok videos for channels that look like fan channels, right? They're doing the same thing that fans are doing of recycling and repurposing and editing appearances of artists. But they are now creating fake stories about their clients in order to tell stories like Dolly Parton is Shabuzi's godmother and got him on the Beyonce album. But the way they're doing it feels really, is it a gray area or is it way over the line?
Yeah.
Because it's using interviews with both Dolly Parton, who's not a client as far as we know of Water Cooler, and Shabuzi, and editing them carefully, cleverly, and then adding AI voices to say the things that aren't actually true.
So this is where it gets so interesting. I'm wondering, like, did that get approved?
Who approved that?
And I love Shabuzi. I also love people getting creative with promotion and art and content. So,
but it feels so close to misinformation.
It's very interesting.
Yeah.
It's a really, really interesting model, and you kind of wonder. I mean, so far it feels like it maybe is right at the line, but you could see how just the wrong little step and it could get way, way out of control.
Yeah, I think that's what makes me feel a little creeped out by it as well, right? Is that Dolly Parton being Shabuzi's godmother is like a relatively innocent story to get in your head.
It's sweet.
It's sweet, but you're right, is that it's that step, is that like one more step across that line and it could get weird or dangerous or, promote some bad things. And I think some of my response to that is colored by how misinformation has been working right now, right?
Yeah.
And that the riots in the UK were prompted by social media stories misidentifying an attacker.
And here's the other really interesting thing. When we're talking about AI specifically and the use of generative AI in creating audio, video to confuse, or in this case, I know it's more to delight and entertain. People really dislike it.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of polling because, again, everyone thought this was going to be the AI election. There's been a lot of polling, at least here in the US, around AI and its reception. And people think it's creepy and weird.
Yeah.
Weird in the current use of that term, not in the keep Austin weird type use of that term. So there's a lot of concern about. I would think that people should think really carefully about how they use these tools and how deep they get into this approach, because there is a very strong potential for severe backlash. Even if it's a well-meaning, creative, fun, light product you're making. People kind of hate that deceptive quality.
Yeah,
and
once
also,
it's exposed,
also, so the folks that did all the fake robocalls using Biden's voice
they just got
got a $1 million fine. So there's some FTC concerns that I would keep in mind if I were a part of an artist team considering this kind of approach. I don't know. I'd love to hear from the Water Cooler folks how they see all this, because they may have some really clear lines and boundaries in place or thoughts about all this. And they may have gotten Dolly Parton's team's approval for all I know.
Yeah, for all we know, this is. I mean, I'm not saying artists shouldn't be pranksters, right? Or marketers shouldn't be pranksters, right? It's just we don't know what's happening behind the scenes. And I wish I could remember where I read this recently, but there's been a lot of talk about misinformation, especially surrounding the election. And somebody smart, I'm pretty sure I saw this on a Washington Post TikTok.
Oh my!
Saying that the biggest problem with misinformation is not that people will change their minds when they see that, right? They're not going to. If somebody is a Taylor Swift fan and is committed to supporting Harris, the Trump AI images of Swifties for Trump is not going to change their mind. But somebody who is a Trump supporter and a Taylor Swift fan will feel like, yeah, that could be it.
Well,
That
yeah.
could be true.
Yeah.
That they might know that it's fake, but it feels right. And so it leads more to those bubbles that we've been talking about that help keep America divided. That it helps people feel more confident in the choices they've made rather than necessarily changing minds.
Yeah, and since we're in the election here, it also keeps people focused on stupid spats and dumb cultural nonsense as opposed to actual issues or policies that could improve their lives.
That's a really good point. It's like if you're trying to be mindful and demure about the considerate about what you're consuming and doing fact checking, that is exhausting.
Totally.
And if that's where your mental energy is going,
you're going to get sucked into all sorts of rabbit holes you don't need to go down.
Yeah.
So, we've gotten a little bit far afield from our beloved music industry, but I think...
Bring it back, Tristra. Bring it back.
Bring it back. But I think there's a lot of food for thought here about how fandoms, how artists' sort of aesthetic clouds can be used in all these different interesting new ways using new technology. And, there's always going to be questions. And so, again, no shade being thrown at Water Cooler. I think what they're doing is really interesting. And maybe I'd love to talk to them at some point. But it really raises some great questions that we should be asking.
And I think all of the stories we've talked about today really reflect how music marketing, music fandom is deeply embedded in cultural shifts that we're seeing. That those tectonic shifts are not just in the music industry; they are global and sort of culture-wide.
All right. Well, this is awesome, Eleanor. Thanks so much for for jamming with me on these articles here.
Thank you for letting me sit in the co-host chair.
Yeah, the co-host chair is really uncomfortable, everybody. It's kind of hard, and I think it's made by some very grumpy Amish grandpa.
Yeah, and I also have a very bright light shining in my face, kind of like I'm being interrogated.
or like you're in a Netflix episode of something. Anyway, thanks so much for listening, everybody, and we will catch you next week.
Thanks for listening to Music Tectonics. If you like what you hear, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app. We have new episodes for you every week. Did you know we do free monthly online events that you, our lovely podcast listeners, can join? Find out more at musictectonics.com. And while you're there, look for the latest about our annual conference and sign up for our newsletter to get updates. Everything we do explores the seismic shifts that shake up music and technology, the way the Earth's tectonic plates cause quakes and make mountains. Connect with Music Tectonics on Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. That's my favorite platform. Connect with me, Dimitri Vitsa, if you can spell it. We'll be back again next week, if not sooner.
You're listening to Music Tectonics.